I'd like to introduce for the first speaker this evening on the panel, John Malkin.
I hope everyone has seen this article in the Good Times. I brought a few extra copies. There are a few up there, and it's online on the Good Times website. And I first noticed this realm of license plate readers coming to Santa Cruz potentially. It was written about by Brad Cava in the Santa Cruz Patch. It was just a short little article, and it sparked my attention. I'll tell you a little bit about license plate readers. Who has not read the article? Okay, I'll explain a little bit about license plate readers, a little about the grant that came from the Department of Justice to the Santa Cruz Police Department to buy these surveillance devices, and then a few ideas about resistance and privacy related to all of this. These devices are put on police cars and also put wherever the police want to put them, actually on bridges, on signposts. The Deputy Chief of Police came to the City Council meeting in September and asked for 8 of these cameras. They take a photograph of every car that drives by and identifies the license plate. The police have a hit list of cars that are wanted for being stolen or connected to other so-called crimes. If the license matches a car that is driving by, an alarm goes off in the car, and the officer can pull over the vehicle and go from there. A lot of these license plate readers also take a photo of the whole car, not just the license plate. And some of those photos include where the car is, who is in the car, who's nearby the car. All of these devices also record the GPS location and the time that it was taken. They take photos over and over. It doesn't stop once there's a hit, for example. So often, and these are used all over the country now, and in England as well, quite a bit. Often people can have 50, 60, 100 photos of their car over a period of a year. And often part of the problem is that the data from these cameras is saved sometimes forever, sometimes for 5 years, sometimes for 2 months. A few police departments save them only for a day or a week or 2 weeks, but that's not very many of them. A man in San Leandro, California, north of here, Mike Katz-LeCabe, who I interviewed for the piece, he asked the police department there for the photos that had been taken of his car, and he got about 100 photos of his car over a period of 2 years. And one of the photos was clearly in his driveway, and his daughter's getting out of the back doors of the car, and him getting out the front door. He had a lot of problems with that being revealed. Michael Robertson in San Diego asked for the photos that had been taken of his car by San Diego police, and he was told, we don't give out the photos, it's private information, because there's an ongoing investigation of everyone in San Diego all the time. Some people end up arguing about should the data be private or public, and that's an interesting thing. That's not the most interesting thing to me. And it actually becomes a strategy of how to resist license plate readers if the data is public or not. The mayor of Minneapolis, there was a newspaper in Minneapolis that asked for the data of the mayor. What photos have you taken of the mayor's car over the past year? They got 41 photos. They published them in a map in the newspaper. The mayor, very shortly after that, said maybe we should relook at policies and procedures. So, yeah, and that's an interesting point. Where is he going? So it leads to a lot of questions about what's important about privacy, what does surveillance reveal, how does surveillance affect people, whether or not they're doing something so-called wrong or criminal. For me, that points to the most important part of this is the expectation of privacy and what happens when you're having private, emotional, in-depth conversations, communications with people, and how that changes when you know you're being watched, regardless of how the data is used. That's one part of this that is significant, I think. In September last year, a grant came to the Santa Cruz Police Department. It's not clear, actually, for me it's not clear how that grant got to the police department, if they asked for it or if Department of Justice offered it to the police. I'm trying to find that out. But they were offered about $37,000. They've used this money for a variety of things in the past. They decided to, the deputy chief of police came to the city council and said, we'd like to spend this money on license plate readers. In interviewing city council people and city manager and, well, a lot of different folks in town, it seems that no one really knew what license plate readers did and the kind of data that they build up over a period of time. The city council voted unanimously to approve that grant to buy license plate readers. One city council person asked one question at that meeting, and he said, how many of these do you want? So he said 8. That's how many Milpitas has. And so one person at that meeting spoke against the license plate readers, and I'm grateful for that. Robert Norse was there at the city council meeting and said he would prefer if the city council did not approve that grant going for license plate readers. So they did approve that. Through Public Records Act requests, I discovered who the Santa Cruz police were in contact with, the manufacturers of license plate readers. There's a bunch of them now. They're making good money. Some of them, like LSAG, E-L-S-A-G, that's one of the manufacturers that Santa Cruz has contacted. They're owned by a company called Finmeccanica, an Italian company that actually is the 8th largest defense contractor on the planet. They build the 8th most, numbers of warships, warplanes, armaments, and license plate readers. For me, too, what is interesting is that there's more invasive and intensive digital surveillance technologies available and being researched and developed now. Facial recognition. So I'm guessing that if police are excited about being able to identify all cars all the time, which license plate readers enable them to do, if you have enough license plate cameras around and they're photographing every car all the time, they'll know where every car is in a city, and ostensibly, because the data is shared nationally, they'll know where everyone is all the time in a car. I think they'd be even more excited to know where all people are all the time, and that's what facial recognition is about. They're developing cameras to do the similar function with people, identify people by photographing their faces. Iris scans, and drones, which are not used yet by police in this country, but police are developing ideas about doing that and policies and procedures for potentially doing that. I'm thinking of the license plate readers as being partly the way the government has talked about drugs and there being gateway drugs. License plate readers are kind of gateway surveillance tool to more invasive tools. It in itself is rather invasive and new, and it's fairly typical what happened in Santa Cruz. It has happened across the country where the introduction of license plate readers happens without any community input. This is the first community meeting about license plate readers coming to Santa Cruz. The grant was approved in September of last year. I'm trying to find out if they've already bought them. They may have bought them and installed one of them yesterday. That's simply true. I hope it's not true. A lot of the grants come from Department of Homeland Security to buy these license plate readers. And a lot of that entails an agreement that the data will go to Department of Homeland Security. This grant apparently came from Department of Justice, isn't directly connected to the Department of Homeland Security. I discovered that there's 78 fusion centers across the country, fusion intelligence centers. One of them is Northern California Regional Intelligence Center. The director is Mike Sena, and I had an interview with him, and he told me he got into the intelligence realm of work on September 11th, 2001. And I think in some ways a lot of this harkens back to that, and some spoken and unspoken ideas about what we should be willing to give up to supposedly be safe. The Northern California Regional Intelligence Center is located at the Federal Building in San Francisco. They collect all the license plate reader data that comes from about 200 law enforcement agencies in California. He told me that he has had contact with Santa Cruz. There's no agreements yet exactly about sharing and storing data there, but they have had contact. My sense is that this whole notion that if we want to have safety, and the deputy chief of police who came to the city council who said we need to have these license plate readers, he was saying stolen car numbers are going up in Santa Cruz, there's more crimes, we need some tools to deal with this and make Santa Cruz safer. I think the idea that if things are more safe, we have to have less freedom and privacy is a false dichotomy, a false presentation. It doesn't need to be that way. And that, I mean, that applies out to the larger realm of the NSA. It's pretty interesting timing with all of this and all the information coming out from Snowden almost daily. 6 billion people around the world their data is collected every day by the United States government. That's amazing. In some ways, it's true that it's people suspected and knew about spying, but the size of it is tremendous. Also, this comes up a lot, the idea that everyone has cameras now, or I don't do anything wrong, so you can take my picture, take 100 pictures of my car, I don't care. I think Edward Snowden, I quoted him at the end of this article, he did this little Christmas video. Did anyone see that? It's just 3 minutes long. The end of the video, I thought it was really interesting. He said a few times, privacy matters. It's almost like people think privacy is not valuable. Or actually, privacy means you need to go somewhere to hide something you're doing. He's pointing out that privacy actually matters. It's in privacy that you know who you are and you envision who you want to become. And you do that alone, you do that with other people, and you can't do that if someone is watching you, grading you, criticizing you, judging you. The license plate readers have already been used to track political dissent in this country. It's not surprising. Police, FBI, CIA, NSA have always used whatever tools they have to do that, to crush democratic movements domestically and internationally. COINTELPRO is a great example of that. It happened to be maybe the most violent period of that, which included assassinations of political dissenters in the United States. But already license plate readers in New York, the police there use them to photograph people who were at political rallies, people who attend mosques. Some folks have pointed out, there was an article in Popular Mechanics, which I don't think of as a highly charged political magazine, but it presented this article that was really thought-provoking. This writer said, hey, here's a thought experiment to do. What if we asked police, what if we put up monitoring equipment, license plate readers, to watch where police go all the time and what they're doing all the time? They would never agree to it. And in fact, it's interesting, in Boston, the police have been asked by their administration to have all of their cars installed with GPS devices, so they'll know where all of their officers are all the time. The police didn't like this idea. And as far as I know, they have protested, actually, I think the Police Officers Union, and so far it hasn't happened. Ironically, in the same city, the Boston Globe recently did an investigative report on license plate readers. Boston police have been using them for quite a while. The Boston Globe, like these other people I mentioned earlier, they made a request and said, send us the photos you've taken of cars with license plate readers over a period of, I'm not sure how long, a week or a month. They picked a specific time period. The ACLU there tells me that there were 3 things that were really interesting about the data. One was they sent them a ton of data, so much that the police were actually embarrassed later. It was kind of a breach of data sharing. That wasn't the most interesting thing, though. They noticed that the license plate readers were being used to focus on particular neighborhoods, lower income and African American Latino neighborhoods. The other thing that was very interesting, probably the most interesting, they noticed that some cars, there was actually one motorcycle that had 50 hits. Every time they photographed this motorcycle, the alarm went off and it said, pull over this motorcycle. Well, they're wondering, why didn't they pull over the motorcycle? Like after the 33rd time, you know? So this leads the ACLU and Electronic Frontiers Foundation and others to believe that the license plate readers are being used for something besides what they're telling them they're being used for, which is collecting data on everyone, and being able to go back in time, essentially, and look at where people have been and who they've been associating with. I'm going to end with a few ideas about creative solutions. I would like to see license plate readers not used in Santa Cruz, especially not until there's a really clear discussion that happens, looking at the pluses and minuses of them. I'm concerned that the design of these devices leads to the potential of mass surveillance. It is a form of mass surveillance. They're not designed just to look at something and give an alarm. It collects the data on every vehicle. I would also, in kind of a larger context, if we do want safety in our community, certainly there's violence in Santa Cruz. There are people taking things from each other that they haven't been given permission to take. I would like to see neighborhoods and people creating actual ways to deal with that without calling the police, and I have hoped for that for a long time. It's a little bit of a large job. Ultimately, I'd like to see people contacting the police less and creating self-reliant neighborhood groups and creating art and using creativity to do that. There's ideas I've heard of creating a constitutionally protected zone in Santa Cruz, which ties into this. Declaring Santa Cruz a compassionate city, which ties into this. And I had a funny idea on the way over here. I got, as part of the requests I made to the Santa Cruz Police Department, they gave me this little booklet that's called Mobile Forensics Field Guide, What Every Peace Officer Must Know. So, you know, police get trained in how to search for things that are connected to supposed crimes. So now, of course, they're trained in how to look in digital data to do that. It's kind of a large realm. In fact, I mean, it blows me away to hear people in government say the most important realm now for being in and controlling is digital data, is the cyber realm. Part of what I found in this, and I'm happy to pass this around, this is telling police officers how to search for digital data. Back when I was a kid and living near Hollywood and seeing in head shops little things to store illegal drugs, you know, cans of Coke, but they're not really cans of Coke. There's like a little hiding thing at the bottom. This is warning police that people might hide digital data. These are jump drives that look like other things, kind of like those other little hideaway things. So one of these looks like a Swiss Army knife, but it's really a jump drive. One of these looks like a piece of sushi. Which is a little weird. But this idea I thought of on the way over here is to create zones that are privacy zones. I would like to see Santa Cruz as a whole be a privacy zone where freedom of speech is really held and people can feel free to get together and talk without fear of being watched. It's already not that way because there's a lot of cameras around. There's something in here that I hadn't heard about. It's called a Faraday bag, invented by a guy named Faraday. If police grab your cell phone and they want to get data off of it, it's possible for you to call your phone and remove the data. The way they make it so you can't do that, they put it in this bag and it blocks waves from getting to the bag. Yeah, so I had this idea riding my bike over here. What about a Faraday cafe? And what about a Faraday Santa Cruz, where you go and you know that you're not going to be listened to, watched, have your data grabbed, any of that. And there's plenty of more information in the article, and I'm happy to answer questions later, and I'm grateful to see so many people here.